We'll bring you the highlights tonight. In the US, after Biden's debate debacle, a gift for Donald Trump from the US Supreme Court. He won't face trials before the presidential election. We'll explain why. In Europe, Putin's friend and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is visiting Kiev. We will tell you why. In France, as the far right surges ahead in the election, others joined ranks to defeat it. We will look at how Marine Le Pen has turned things around for her party. In the UK, 2 days to go for the polls. We focus on the campaigns and the obsession with photo ops. In Turkey, anti-Syria riots spread. Erdogan blames the opposition. We are also looking at the CTC versus in-hand pay. It's a pain point for all salaried employees. Why is the gap widening and what can you do? Also, as air turbulence worsens, is flying becoming more dangerous? And what is the sock war between millennials and Gen Z? We'll talk about all of that and more. The headlines first. At least 100 people crushed to death in a stampede in northern India, several more injured. The incident took place during a religious event in Uttar Pradesh's Hathras district. The state's chief minister orders an investigation. The president and the prime minister condole the deaths. Nepal's embattled prime minister refuses to resign. This is despite an agreement between the country's largest parties to form a new coalition government. Prime Minister Prachand says he is ready to face a vote of confidence in parliament. The prime minister has won 3 votes of confidence during his 1.5-year term. Tensions continue in Kenya. Police fire tear gas to disperse crowds in the capital Nairobi after activists call for fresh protests. Last week, President William Ruto was forced to withdraw a controversial tax bill which had led to deadly violence in the country. China funds Vanuatu's new presidential palace, reigniting concerns over Beijing's reach in the South Pacific nation. Vanuatu owes about 40% of its external debt to China, making it vulnerable to Beijing's debt-trap diplomacy. Former spy chief Dick Schoof sworn in as the new Prime Minister of the Netherlands. He will be heading a right-wing coalition government. The new Prime Minister wants to implement the country's strictest ever immigration policy. And a Chinese badminton player dies due to cardiac arrest after collapsing on the court. The 17-year-old fell ill during a match in Indonesia. The organizers have dismissed claims that the medical team were not prompt in helping the teenager. It was a blockbuster day in India's parliament. Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered his longest speech yet. He spoke for more than 2 hours and 14 minutes, and it had all the ingredients: lines from a Bollywood classic, personal taunts, and a list of his government's achievements. But things were not off to a good start. Modi's speech was a reply to the motion of thanks to the president's address. It's a customary event for every session of parliament. It's customary. Yesterday, it was the opposition's turn. They used the opportunity to corner the government. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi spoke first. It was his first speech after being appointed leader of the opposition. His speech did garner a lot of attention. At one point, the Prime Minister himself rose to rebut him. It was a rare intervention by Prime Minister Modi. Take a look at this.
विषय बहुत गंभीर है. पूरे हिंदू समाज को हिंसक कहना ये गंभीर विषय है.
नहीं, नरेंद्र मोदी जी पूरा हिंदू समाज नहीं है.
Today was Prime Minister Modi's turn. He was expected to answer the issues raised by the opposition, but as he began speaking, chaos broke out. Opposition MPs began shouting and chanting. Some of them also rushed to the well of the House, and I guess this was expected. The opposition now has a larger presence in the Lok Sabha, and more numbers equal more voice, or in this case, more disruption. But it's a new experience for the Prime Minister. He's had complete control over the Lok Sabha since 2014, so the constant heckling was a challenge. Perhaps that's why the Prime Minister decided to put on his headphones while speaking. It's a departure from his previous speeches. Now we come to the content. Modi began by attacking opposition parties. He called the Congress a parasite for its allies. He also accused them of spreading lies. But the sharpest criticism was reserved for Rahul Gandhi. Prime Minister Modi did not take his name, but the message was quite clear. He repeatedly referred to Baalak Buddhi. which loosely translates to childish behaviour, an obvious reference to Rahul Gandhi. He also borrowed lines from Bollywood classic Sholay to take on the Congress. Listen to this.
99 मार्क्स लेकर एक बालक घमंड में घूम रहा था। ये 100 में से 99 नहीं लाया, ये तो 543 में से लाया है। अब उस बालक बुद्धि को कौन समझाए कि तुमने फेल होने का वर्ल्ड रिकॉर्ड बना दिया है। कल सदन में यही बचकाना हरकत देखी है। कल यहाँ बालक बुद्धि का विलाप चल रहा था, इसलिए मैं उनको भी परमात्मा कुछ सद्बुद्धि दे, मैं बालक बुद्धि को भी सद्बुद्धि दे, इस अपेक्षा के साथ कि आज हिंदुओं पर झूठा आरोप लगाने की साजिश हो रही है, गंभीर षड्यंत्र हो रहा है। ये कहा गया हिंदू हिंसक होते हैं, ये है आपके संस्कार, ये है आपका चरित्र। ये देश शताब्दियों तक इसे भूलने वाला नहीं है।
Again, this is something new. In the past, Prime Minister Modi has targeted the Congress party, but he never spent time attacking Rahul Gandhi in the House. So what prompted this one? Yesterday's speech. Rahul Gandhi levelled multiple allegations at the government on Manipur, on NEET, on minorities. He also targeted the Prime Minister personally. At one point, he mocked the Prime Minister, saying that he had a direct line to God.
एक दिन प्रधानमंत्री 8 बजे कहते हैं, पता नहीं फाइन ट्यूनिंग हो गई भगवान के साथ, डायरेक्ट मैसेज भगवान। सर ने बोला है, सर प्रधानमंत्री ने ये बोला है, ये मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूं, प्रधानमंत्री ने बोला है कि मेरा डायरेक्ट कनेक्शन है भगवान के साथ। ये प्रधानमंत्री जी ने कहा है, पब्लिक में मीडिया को कहा है कि मैं बायोलॉजिकल नहीं हूं, मेरा डायरेक्ट कनेक्शन भगवान के साथ है, मैं नहीं बोल रहा हूं। और जो लोग अपने आप को हिंदू कहते हैं वो 24 घंटा हिंसा हिंसा हिंसा, नफरत नफरत नफरत, असत्य सत्य असत्य।
It was a very sharp attack, something the Prime Minister has not experienced in Parliament, hence the decision to hit back, to target Rahul Gandhi personally. And the criticism was not limited to the party or the leader. Modi kept talking about the Congress ecosystem, perhaps a reference to Congress allies and their civil society backers. The Prime Minister focused heavily on that point.
कांग्रेस के साथ ही कांग्रेस का इकोसिस्टम भी रहा है। ये इकोसिस्टम से मिली खाद पानी, इसके दम पर एक कांग्रेस की मदद से ये इकोसिस्टम 70 साल तक फला फूला है और उसकी इकोसिस्टम दिन रात बिजली जला करके हिंदुस्तान के नागरिकों के मन में ये प्रस्थापित करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि उन्होंने हमें हरा दिया है। मैं आज इकोसिस्टम को बता देना चाहता हूं, उसकी हर साजिश का जवाब अब उसी की भाषा में मिलेगा।
And what about policy? The Prime Minister did talk about Kashmir. He focused on the changes since Article 370 was removed. He also spoke on NEET. Now, we've talked about this before. The NEET is a common entrance test for medical courses in India. But this year's exam is mired in controversy. It has put the spotlight on paper leaks and corruption in the education system. Prime Minister Modi did talk about it, and he promised a resolution soon.
मैं भी देश के हर विद्यार्थी को, देश के हर नौजवानों को कहूंगा कि सरकार ऐसी घटनाओं को रोकने के लिए अत्यंत गंभीर है। नीट के मामले में पूरे देश में लगातार गिरफ्तारियां की जा रही है।
Manipur was not mentioned though. Opposition MPs kept chanting Manipur throughout his speech, but there was no mention of it. In fact, Rahul Gandhi has written a letter to Prime Minister Modi. He's seeking a debate on the violence there. Let's see how the government responds to that. But beyond the personal insults and attacks, what did these 2 days teach us? Broadly, 2 things. One, this is not the parliament of 2019 or 2014. The opposition is a lot stronger, so chances are the government will be challenged a lot more. It will not be one-way traffic. And 2, we may see more action and debate can coexist. And we saw an example of that in Parliament today, in fact. Dozens of opposition MPs were seated in the well as the Prime Minister spoke. After a while, he handed one of them a glass of water. I guess that's a good note to end the story on.
आदरणीय सभापति जी, मुझे एक किस्सा याद आता है।
Who is winning the US presidential election? It's hard to say with certainty, but increasingly, Donald Trump's chances are looking better. His opponent, Joe Biden, looks increasingly weak after fumbling his way through a presidential debate. There's talk of Democrats looking to replace him, which would clear the path for Trump. But his biggest hurdle were his legal battles. Trump faces 91 criminal charges in 4 cases, and now he may get some relief on that front too. Thanks to the US Supreme Court, it delivered a judgment yesterday, a judgment on the powers of the president. And it seems that one of those powers is immunity. Not for everything, but immunity for any official act they conduct. This is what the US Supreme Court said, that a president's unofficial or private acts can be prosecuted, but not his or her official acts. So it's not total immunity, it's partial. And yet it helps Donald Trump. He's calling it a big win. This is what he posted on his social media platform, Truth Social. It said, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American." That's what Trump posted. Now, Trump is not the president, not yet anyway. So why is he celebrating this ruling? Because it may just power him to the White House again. You see, Donald Trump is facing a number of legal challenges, like I just said, like the January 6th case. On January 6, 2021, there was a riot at the US Capitol building. Trump supporters stormed the building because he'd lost the presidential election. Trump is accused of inciting that riot. A few days later, Joe Biden took oath as president, and Trump has been facing a trial over this. But then along comes this new ruling by the US Supreme Court. It grants immunity to Donald Trump for his official acts as president. The acts that were conducted in his official capacity as US president. What does that mean? Well, no one can be sure at this point. It's open to interpretation. Did Trump talk to the rioters in his official capacity as president, or did he address them as a private citizen? That's for the courts to decide. And they will take time to figure this out, to create a rule book for official and unofficial acts of a president. And that, the fact that time will be needed, will certainly help Trump. Because at the moment, he just needs to avoid trials for a few months. The presidential election is slated for November. Trials were lined up in some of the cases against Trump, but now the scenario has changed. There are new rules and limits in play, meaning the courts will have to scour through all the legal documents in Trump's cases. And line by line, they will have to decide what was an official act and what was not. And that could take months, if not years. Long enough for Trump to return to the White House if he wins and just grant himself a pardon, which a president can do. Trump's opponents know this. Biden said it himself.
Now the man who sent that mob to the U.S. Capitol is facing potential criminal conviction for what happened that day. And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election. The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation.
Biden admitted that it's highly unlikely that Trump will go to trial before the election. So with this immunity ruling, the US Supreme Court has made it easier for Trump to get re-elected, to win the election. Now, irrespective of a trial, Trump's core supporters were going to vote for him. But in America, the deciding factor is often the swing voters, the undecided ones. They could have been swayed by the legal proceedings. Trump could have lost their votes had the trials begun. But now he may be able to hold on to some of those undecided votes. Basically, Donald Trump has no trials to worry about before the November election, and Joe Biden is taking this hard. Yesterday, he made this plea to American voters.
I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years. But any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent. May God bless you all, and may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you.
He spoke about Justice Sotomayor, who did not agree with the immunity verdict. She said, it makes a president, and I'm quoting, king above the law. This ruling makes a president king above the law. And the way things are going, Trump may end up exercising royal power from the Oval Office next year. Our next story features a man who's called Europe's Trump, who also happens to be rooting for Donald Trump. His name is Viktor Orban. He's the Prime Minister of Hungary. And today, he made a trip across the border. After more than a decade, he visited Kiev. Now, this is a significant moment because Orban is not like the rest of the European heads of state. Viktor Orban is friends with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and he's been a thorn in Ukraine's side. Ever since the Russia-Ukraine war began in 2022, Orban has been the sole dissenting voice in the European Union. He has done his best to slow down sanctions against Russia. He has tried to delay aid for Ukraine, and he's also objected to Ukraine joining the European Union. So then why is Orban in Kiev today? Well, because the Hungarian Prime Minister has been given an additional role. For 6 months, his country has taken over the EU presidency, the presidency of the Council of the European Union. It is a rotating role. Every member state gets it for 6 months. And right now, it is Hungary's turn. And what are the responsibilities attached to the EU presidency? Well, Hungary will have to chair meetings. They will have to ensure the continuity of the EU's agenda. They will have to act as an honest and neutral broker to foster cooperation between the EU states. Basically, Hungary will be taking over administrative duties. It is not a glamorous role, but every EU member has to do it for 6 months. In this new role, Viktor Orban decided that the first thing he needs to do was to visit Ukraine and meet Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. There's no love lost there. Zelensky and Orban do not see eye to eye on a number of issues. The most obvious one, of course, is the war. Orban believes that Ukraine cannot win the war. So sending Kiev weapons is just prolonging the inevitable. Instead, Viktor Orban says that Ukraine should seek a ceasefire, and he said the same today during his meeting with Zelensky.
I asked the President Volodymyr Zelensky to think about whether we could reverse the order and speed up peace talks with making a ceasefire first. A ceasefire connected to a deadline would give a chance to speed up peace talks. I explored this possibility with the President, and I am grateful for his honest answers and negotiation.
Orban commended Zelensky on the recent peace summit held in Switzerland, the summit that Russia was not invited to, but Orban probably was not being sarcastic. He said peace initiatives take time to work, and he proposed reversing the order. This is what Viktor Orban suggested. Get a ceasefire in place first, and then work on a peace deal. It doesn't sound like the worst idea in the world, but it seems like Viktor Orban's plan was not accepted, which was only to be expected. If Zelensky was going to stop the war and sue for peace, he would have done so months ago. But Ukraine says they will only accept a quote-unquote just peace. What does that mean? Getting back all the territory that Russia currently controls. That's what Kiev wants, and Putin is unlikely to accept this demand, which means that the war will drag on. But Viktor Orban was not in Kiev just to pitch a doomed vision of peace. He also had other plans.
We would like to make the relationship between the two countries better. We would like to make a broad bilateral agreement with Ukraine, similar to the ones we already made with our neighbors in the past. We would be happy to take part in the modernization of Ukraine's economy. We would like an ordered framework for this.
Today we discussed with Mr. Prime Minister Orban the most important questions of our relations, of our neighborly relations. Trade, cross-border cooperation, infrastructure, and energy issues. We've also talked about the humanitarian sphere today, everything that affects the lives of our people in Ukraine and Hungary.
Think about some of the words that the two of them used. Modernization of Ukraine's economy and infrastructure and energy issues. The two leaders were talking about business, the business of rebuilding Ukraine. There's a lot of money to be made in that. And it seems that Orban wants a slice of the pie. Zelensky may be willing to pay that price for Hungary's support because even though the EU presidency is an administrative role, Orban now has more power to create hurdles for Ukraine. And Zelensky will be hoping to avoid that while he focuses on surviving Russia's attacks.
It is time for a change, and we are it. Thank you.
And I invite you all to join our mission to stop the chaos, turn the page, and start to rebuild our country. Thank you so much.
When I say election campaign, what is it that comes to your mind? If you live in India, I can guess. A packed open ground or a road show or walls plastered with party posters. In most democracies, that's the strategy. Rally people and show strength. But in Britain, it's very different. You won't see India or US-style mega rallies there. Instead, you will see more personal engagements. Maybe a stop at the local pub or a tour of a factory or even bungee jumps. So tonight we're focusing on the British election campaign, not the substance but the style. Let's look at Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Today he visited a retail distribution centre. Think of it as a mega supermarket. He put on a fluorescent jacket, he spoke to the employees and saw robots packing products. Take a look.
Still might be a bit warm, aren't they? Yeah, lovely. Perfect. Right. That is warm to the touch. That is very nice.
He's getting used to that jacket. He had it on yesterday as well. That's when Sunak visited a pharmacy business in Staffordshire. Again, the same routine, meet, greet, and see how things are done. And the list doesn't end here. He's visited British pubs, he's trudged along farmlands with sheep, and he's inspected nuclear power stations.
Here we go.
Twist it, and then you'll hear the pump start. So if
Okay.
you want to have a go at that.
How far am I twisting it?
So
just
turn
to where it says start.
That's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
fine.
So turn.
So the focus is on two things. First is optics. You want to be seen as active and personally involved. You want to be seen as doing something. The second is intimacy. Massive rallies may look impressive on TV, but they lack the personal touch. You can't really connect with individual voters. And it's not just Rishi Sunak. His rivals are doing the same. Labour Party's Keir Starmer is also doing pub and factory runs. But one leader has gone a step ahead. That's Ed Davey of the Liberal Democrats, his campaign looks more like reality TV. One day he's bungee jumping, the next day he's doing Zumba, and the day after he's gliding across water. You have to see this. I know what you're thinking. Must be some fringe party with nothing to lose. Well, think again. The Liberal Democrats are a major political force. They're projected to get 11.5% of the votes. If that number holds, it would be their best ever performance. Let's also go back in time. British politicians have made a habit of such stunts. We've compiled the best ones from the last decade for you. Take a look. Let's call it what it is, a photo op. Because Boris Johnson has never ziplined after that, not that we know of, nor has Jeremy Corbyn sat on the floor of a train, nor has David Cameron been to a fish market. It's all for the cameras. But why is Britain obsessed with such photo ops? It is said to have started in 1979. Margaret Thatcher was on the campaign trail. She visited a farm and was photographed holding a calf. Now, this visit had no political point. The only goal was to take this picture, to tell rural voters that they could trust Thatcher. More than 40 years have passed since that photo op. The cameras have certainly improved. Photo ops have now become video ops. Yet Britain's obsession continues. The question is why? You see, British politicians have historically come from wealthy families. Just consider their education. Only 7% of Britain's general population has studied in private schools. Only 7%, meaning schools where you pay a fee. That is private schools. The rest of the people have studied in public institutions. Now compare that to politicians. 44% Conservative MPs attended private schools, 38% Liberal Democrats did, and 19% Labour MPs also attended private schools. It gets even worse at the top. Around 20 British Prime Ministers have studied at Eton. It's an elite private school in Britain. Guess how much they charge? More than £46,000 per year. To put that in context, the average annual salary in Britain is £34,000. So you can see the issue of optics. Voters will see these leaders as privileged, as people who cannot understand common problems. It's even worse for someone like Rishi Sunak because he is Britain's richest politician and also Prime Minister. So what does he do? He goes on a photo op spree. He does everything to come across as an ordinary Briton. But let's face it, optics alone do not matter. Just look at Donald Trump in the US. He's a billionaire real estate mogul, yet he's painted himself as a common man's defender. So maybe Britain should move beyond photo ops and focus on policy instead. Now let's look at another impending election, the one in France. They're having a snap election. President Emmanuel Macron announced it last month, a sudden, unexpected parliamentary election. The second round of this election will be held on Sunday. The first round took place last Sunday, on the 30th of June, and it delivered a political earthquake. Victory for the National Rally Party and their leader, Marine Le Pen. Her party won about 34% of the votes in the first round, and that's the largest vote share, 34%. So she looked like she was on course to win the election outright. Now, France has 577 parliamentary seats. If you get more than 50% of the votes, you win a seat. If not, you head to the second round. So after the first round, some seats have already been called, but about 300 seats are still in contention. They will go into the second round. This is where voting will take place on coming Sunday. Now, the majority mark in the French parliament is 289. After the first round, this is how things stand. The National Rally, Marine Le Pen's party, is projected to win anywhere between 250 to 300 seats on their own. So they could get absolute majority. and install their own Prime Minister, who would be this man, Jordan Bardella, Marine Le Pen's protege. It's a strong possibility, and it sent alarm bells ringing among other parties, like Macron's centrist party and the left-wing coalition in France. They were all worried. So both these groups have decided to join hands. They staunchly oppose the National Rally, which is seen as a far-right party. It is known to be Eurosceptic and anti-immigrant. In the past, this party, Marine Le Pen's party, has also been accused of racism and anti-Semitism. In fact, one of the National Rally candidates has just withdrawn from the second round because an old picture of her surfaced, where she is seen wearing a Nazi costume. And this is just one example. Things like this make the National Rally controversial, and by extension, its leaders, Le Pen and Bardella. For a long time, the National Rally was considered a fringe party, the far right. But now, after last Sunday's election result, it has clearly become mainstream. And this is thanks to Marine Le Pen. The National Rally Party was founded in 1972. Back then, it was called the National Front. The founder was Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le Pen. He was known for making racist, anti-Semitic and homophobic slurs, which is why his party was considered dangerous and fringe. Now, the daughter, Marine Le Pen, took over in 2011, and in 2015, she expelled her father. That's after he described the Holocaust as a detail of World War II. So Marine kicked out her anti-Semitic father and began cleaning up her party's image. In 2018, she even changed the name from National Front to National Rally, and it's because of her efforts that the party is now such a success. But that also means it is now a threat to the more mainstream parties in France, like Macron's centrist party and the left-wing coalition, the New Popular Front. So all of these parties, the centrists and the leftists, have come up with a plan to join hands and stop the National Rally. They're talking about making a Republican front. The second round of polling will take place on the 7th of July, and each candidate who got more than 12.5% of the vote in the first round can contest, which means that many seats in the second round will see a three-way contest between the National Rally, a centrist candidate, and a left-wing candidate. So instead of cutting each other's votes, the centrists and the leftists are going for tactical withdrawals. So their votes are consolidated and they beat the National Rally. That is the idea behind this Republican front, and it has worked in the past against Le Pen's father. He fought multiple French presidential elections and came close to a victory in the year 2002 against Jacques Chirac. That's when the first Republican front swung into action. The centrists and the leftists joined hands to defeat Jean-Marie Le Pen. And Jacques Chirac won with a landslide. And since then, if this party gets close to victory, the others close ranks. They did this against Marine Le Pen too, in the 2012 and 2017 presidential elections. And now they're trying this in the parliamentary election as well. But will it work this time? Will the frustrated French voters agree to maintain the status quo again? We'll find out on Sunday. In Turkey, riots broke out on Sunday and it's only gotten worse since. This is how it started. A Syrian man was accused of abusing a minor. Soon a mob targeted Syrian homes and businesses. Some of them were set on fire. Turkey has since arrested 470 people. President Erdogan has urged for calm. He's blaming his rivals for stoking hate. Now, Turkey hosts 3.6 million Syrian refugees. But the country has a love-hate relationship with them. When the Syrian war broke out back in 2011, Ankara welcomed them. But over the past few years, the Turkish economy has been struggling and many people blame the refugees for draining their resources. The riots come days after Erdogan talked about restoring ties with Syria. Will that plan be derailed now? Our next report tells you.
This is Kayseri, a city located in central Turkey. On Sunday, riots broke out here. It started after a Syrian refugee was caught sexually abusing a 7-year-old child. The news spread like wildfire, especially on social media. Soon, an angry mob took to the streets. They wanted to catch the suspected abuser, but instead, they targeted other Syrians in the neighborhood. The mob stoned homes, burned down businesses, and targeted other Syrian refugees. By midnight, things got out of control. It was a full-blown riot, so the police had to intervene. They tried to disperse the crowd, but scuffles injured at least 15 police officers. By morning, the crowd had dispersed, and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan blamed it on the opposition. He accused them of stoking hatred politics against Turkey's Syrian refugees.
No one can reach anywhere by fueling xenophobia and hate towards refugees. One of the reasons for the saddening events caused by a small group in Kayseri is the opposition's poisonous discourse. No matter who it is, burning people's homes and their relatives, engaging in vandalism, setting fire to the streets is unacceptable.
Turkey is home to 3.6 million Syrian refugees. When the war broke out in Syria, Erdogan welcomed refugees with open arms. But since then, Ankara has struggled with them. It has failed to integrate Syrian refugees into society. That has led to several incidents of violence, xenophobia, racism, and with a struggling economy, politicians accuse refugees of draining Turkey's resources. Last year, the issue was a political lightning rod in the elections. Erdogan's rivals blamed them for Turkey's economic crisis. Most parties pledged to return them to Syria. It hasn't happened yet. But the riot has fled tensions again between Ankara and Damascus. In Atareb, people chanted against the Turkish army. They threw things at the Turkish military tanks. Atareb is located in northwestern Syria, but it is under the control of Turkish troops. In the town of Kazawiya, protesters were seen pulling down the Turkish flag. At another border crossing, the Turkish flag was removed and burned. The recent violence comes after a peace offering by Erdogan. Just days ago, the Turkish president said that he was open to meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. He even talked about restoring ties between the two countries. Now, Erdogan and Assad have long been close friends. The two leaders even vacationed together once in 2008. But things soured after war broke out in Syria in 2011. Then, Erdogan had backed opposition groups in Syria who wanted to oust Assad. But a decade later, the war is long forgotten, and the Arab world is bringing Assad back into the fray. So, Erdogan is doing the same, and it is crucial for Turkey to mend fences with Syria, as it wants to repatriate millions of Syrian refugees. And that's only possible with the cooperation of the Assad government. While relations between the two nations have taken a turn for the better, the recent violence shows that there is still a long way to go.
This story is for all salaried professionals. It's a shared complaint. It's also an age-old problem. CTC versus actual pay. Now, CTC stands for cost to company. It indicates your annual salary package, say 12 lakh rupees. So how much would you earn in a month? Ideally 1 lakh rupees, but that's not how CTCs work. There are multiple deductions and taxable components. So as a rough rule, you get around 70%. That's how much comes in your bank account. The rest is only on paper. I know it sounds confusing. So we got a few memes to explain this problem for you. Take a look. This can be frustrating for employees because on paper, your package is pretty good. But on salary day, it's not so impressive. Let's understand why. Your CTC is the sum of everything that the company spends on you. Your salary, your benefits, your bonuses, maybe insurance or food coupons or travel expenses. All of this combines to give your CTC. Now, this has mainly two mandatory deductions. Two deductions from your CTC. The first obviously is income tax. The second is contributions to the Provident Fund or the PF. Now, PF is a government savings scheme, in India at least. Every employee must put 12% of their salary into the PF. Your employer will also put the same amount. But here's the catch. Your employer's contribution is also part of the CTC. And this is just one example. Companies add a lot of elements to inflate your CTC, like stock options. They won't pay you regularly, but they will make your CTC look bigger. Or one-time bonuses. Technically, you will get it just once at the company. So it's not a regular payment. Yet sometimes it's added to the CTC. Other examples include insurance or food coupons. Again, these may count as benefits, but you cannot convert these into money, yet it's part of the CTC. So once all of this is deducted, you're left with a much smaller amount. Why do companies do this? For starters, a bigger CTC will attract more talent. It's a deciding factor for many job seekers. The same applies to existing workers. Maybe an employee is in talks with another company. You can use an inflated package to retain them. So to put it simply, the CTC is a lot like a bait. It lures you into a company. But is there a way around it? One strategy is to negotiate better. A lot of employees focus only on the CTC. They ask companies to increase the overall package. But next time, focus on the actual pay. Negotiate that part instead and try to reduce the number of deductions. Now, we know that's easier said than done. After all, there is an inherent power difference here, the company versus you. Nonetheless, it's worth giving it a shot. Now we come to the systemic changes. One problem is obviously taxes. Some countries in the Gulf, for instance, do not charge income tax, so the CTC is very close to the actual pay. But unlike the Gulf, most countries do charge tax. And for them, it's a question of complexity. How complicated is your tax and payroll system? And in India, it's very complicated. Take a look at this list. India's payroll system was ranked as the 9th most complicated in the world. There are many reasons for that. Regional variations in law, different public holidays, different wage structures, and also paperwork. Now, in most cases, complexity leads to losses. Let me show you another report. It found that 40% Indian companies are tax inefficient. What does that mean? It means that the salary structure is not ideal, because of which employees are paying more taxes. If some tweaks are made, they could earn a lot more. How much more? This report says an annual increase of 1 lakh rupees. Now, the principle is quite simple. Certain expenses carry a tax exemption, like spending on your house rent or allowance for children, or maybe a home loan EMI. If your salary is optimized for these expenses, you can pay less in tax. So why don't companies do it? Because it's complicated. You must file claims for tax deductions. The claim has to be processed. They have to be verified. And finally, the deductions will be made. In 43% of Indian companies, this whole process is paper-based. It is not digitized, so it is not fast. In 57% of these firms, this process takes more than a week. An employee spends an average of 30 minutes doing it. Surely we can simplify the process. We can make it easier for employees. You know, companies keep talking about welfare of workers. They organize seminars, they conduct surveys. But why not focus on the issue that really matters, the issue of salary? Ask any employee, they prioritize their income more than anything else. If companies can deliver on that, they will have loyalty and productivity. So it's time for them to declutter the CTC. It's time to give employees what they have been promised. The artificial intelligence race is raging. China and the US are vying for supremacy. They have poached and applauded tech giants. They've issued sanctions, and now they have a new tool at their disposal: United Nations resolutions. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a new resolution. It wants to boost AI capabilities of developing nations and encourage international cooperation for the development of AI. Ironically, this resolution of so-called AI unity has been led by Beijing and co-sponsored by Washington. What does this mean for the AI war? Is the world ready for what is to come, and how are nations faring in terms of AI preparedness? Here's a report.
Fair, open, inclusive and non-discriminatory. What sounds like corporate jargon straight out of HR 101 is actually part of a UN resolution on, believe it or not, artificial intelligence.
Like GPT-3.
The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a new resolution. It looks to boost AI capabilities of developing nations and encourage quote-unquote international cooperation on capacity building of AI.
Has to do with your subscription.
In simpler terms, the resolution wants nations to work together when it comes to AI. It wants to ensure that poor nations benefit from AI. It sounds rather sweet, but guess who led this resolution of tech unity? None other than China. Now, Gen Z would probably call this sus. For the millennials out there, that means suspicious. First, because China is involved. It's sending a message of unity. Talk about irony. Secondly, this is a non-binding resolution, meaning it's largely symbolic. Almost as good as making vacation plans on group chat with only promises of showing up. But there's a third and probably the biggest reason. The fact that China has backed this proposal, and among other nations, the US co-sponsored it. The two nations are at war. Not literally, of course. We're talking about a tech war. The US and China are jockeying for AI supremacy on the global stage. They are racing to write the rules for AI governance, and they've stopped at nothing. From directly or indirectly poaching tech giants to employing sanctions. Recently, the US issued draft rules to ban certain investments in AI sectors in China. In March, the US sponsored a resolution to monitor AI for potential risks. This was the first resolution of its kind, and it was co-sponsored by 123 countries, including China, which reluctantly joined the party towards the end. Now, China has passed its own resolution along the same lines. This is being seen as a clear move to vie for power, and China is using this opportunity to extend the US a hand while giving it a nudge.
If you look at the US resolution, it's more general, and the Chinese resolution is more focused on the capacity building. So that's why we believe that these are two complementary resolutions. And with respect to the sanctions imposed by the U.S. government, as you know, our position, we are firmly opposed to these sanctions. We don't believe that what the U.S. government's position or decision will be helpful to the healthy development of the AI technology.
So the US and China are passive-aggressively fighting this out. AI is obviously on their minds. But what about the others? How are other nations coping with artificial intelligence? Are they ready for what's to come? According to the International Monetary Fund, not particularly. They released an artificial intelligence preparedness index last week. It tracks 174 economies globally for AI readiness. This happens on 4 parameters: digital infrastructure, human capital and labor market policies, innovation and economic integration, and regulation. Singapore, Denmark, and the US got the highest ratings. What about India? It stands at 72. According to the report, AI can increase productivity and boost economic growth, but it can also wipe out millions of jobs, about 40% jobs globally, and it can widen inequality because many countries lack the infrastructure needed to harness the benefits of AI. Keeping this in mind, the UN resolution comes at an opportune time. If followed, it may curb the inequality. But realistically speaking, it could be a plot for Beijing to one-up Washington while paying well-choreographed lip service to the rest of the world.
Before our last story tonight, let me ask you a question. How do you spot a millennial? You know, someone born between 1981 and 1996. That's a millennial. Apparently, you can tell by the length of their socks. And I'm not the one saying this. Gen Z is. This generation was born between 1997 and 2012, and now it has declared a war on ankle socks, which are a dead giveaway of millennials, they say. Now, socks may be about a mild generational difference, but the drama surrounding them is about a greater culture war that is afoot. So, which are the worst hit areas and who is winning? Here's a report.
We have a challenge for you. Try it if you dare. Open your sock drawer and answer us this. What kind of socks do you have? If you say ankle socks, we have bad news for you. You are most likely a skinny jeans wearing, side part loving, no home owning millennial. And we aren't saying this, Gen Z is, because they would rather die than expose their ankles to the wind. All of this according to a TikTok trend that has gone viral. Gen Z is infamous for belittling boomers, but now they've turned their attention to millennials and their socks, and a sock war is afoot. Some young people are declaring a preference for crew socks, meaning socks that rise to midway up the shin. They say it's a so-called millennial tell when people wear ankle-length socks. For instance, some are calling actor Jennifer Lawrence brave for stepping out in millennial socks. Meanwhile, millennials are offended. After all, they went to incredible lengths to wear socks that only went up to their ankles, if you know what we mean. To many, this may sound strange. Sock preferences, which are just a mild generational difference, have been exaggerated to theatrical lengths. But this isn't too surprising. We're seeing a standard Gen Z versus millennial culture war at play. And socks are not the first battle. If there's a Hall of Fame where trends go to die, side parting is one of the first inductees. Apparently, that too is very millennial. Then there's skinny jeans. Gen Z doesn't want their calves to make contact with their denims. Maybe they want to be breezy in all aspects of life. Now, Gen Z may have rejected major trends, but it did bring back a few others, like high-waisted jeans. That's what happens when bloating is not a problem for the young. But some of the biggest battles have nothing to do with fashion. Cue passive-aggressive linguistics. Gen Z claims the millennials are aging out of the internet, what many call the millenopause. Did you know that using this laughing emoji with tears is outdated now? And some emojis that are not outdated have changed in meaning. Like the skull emoji. To Gen Z, it does not literally mean death. But that's not the only thing that's killing millennials. Because these linguists are now entering the territory of serious business like the workplace. Gen Z wants workplaces to be more casual, so they're saying goodbye to formal email sign-offs. According to surveys, 41% workers say yours truly is dying. 36% claim yours sincerely has been given a death sentence. Meanwhile, lukewarm regards is taking their place, quite literally. It's no wonder that 3 in 4 managers find it difficult to work with Gen Z. While this friction is not easily resolved, millennials can feel vindicated after all. Gen Z can keep their socks, millennials will keep the money.